I'll be shooting RAW plus JPEG, but we'll be looking exclusively at the JPEGs, except where noted. And I'm on the landscape picture style, white balance set to auto, all noise reduction turned off. So let's explore the 5D Mark II in a twofold approach. First, why buy a camera this old? And secondly, if you're going to buy a camera this old, why the 5D Mark II in particular? When we talk about cameras, when we choose a camera, what are we choosing? What's to talk about? What matters, what doesn't? You're going to buy a camera, but there's potentially a lot of money to be saved. You don't necessarily have to jump to something new and expensive. It really depends on the reason behind the purchase. So examine that. And stripping away all the noise, all the tricks your brain will play on you to try to get you to spend way more money than you need to. Just remember that a camera is a tool, a simple means to an end. And that's it. Anything beyond that is just you overcomplicating the matter, which of course I'm super guilty of, so not criticizing. But whatever that camera model is that you're lusting after, just remember photographers have been getting by for 200 years without it just fine. It may seem like that's the answer to your problems, but is that reality? All those other cameras were bullshit, but they finally cracked it. They finally made a decent camera. How lucky I was to be born into this time. Now I just need to go into debt for $5 or $6 grand to go get it. It seems trite to say because I've heard it 1,000 times, but it's also kind of profound to me, important. Yes, this thing does the job as well as it ever did. But should you buy the whatever camera in whatever year? Is the whatever model good enough whenever, at this time, at this other time? Yes, the answer is always yes. If it was good enough to do the job before, it's good enough now. And if it's not good enough now, it couldn't have possibly been good enough then, because the job itself has not changed. Or if it has, it's changed in your favor. I mean, there's not a greater need for you to get a shot in focus now versus then, or achieve a correct exposure now versus then. With better post-processing tools, in reality, there's less of a need, because more can be fixed or faked after the fact, more quickly, more easily, and with more credible results. So yes, it sounds tiresome to say it, sounds tiresome to hear it, but it's true nonetheless. It's like, how do you get better? Practice. Yeah, but I mean besides practice. Everyone asking that question already knows the answer is practice. They just want a different answer. To skip all that hard work stuff. Find some undiscovered shortcut. Surely laziness is the answer, right? Understand I'm lazy too about many things, but I'm not lazy about what I'm also passionate about. That doesn't make any goddamn sense. If you're lazy about photography, perhaps a reevaluation is in order. If you really do some honest self-reflection, I suspect you'll discover that you're actually not all that passionate about it. Which is fine. Do yourself a favor and find the thing that you are passionate about. You'll know you've found it because you won't be looking for a shortcut. You'll dive into the work with absolute focus, absolute pleasure. Be lazy about taking out the trash or returning that juicer to Amazon. I'm with you, that stuff sucks. But don't be lazy about your art. That's sacred. Do it right. Right, okay. Old cameras are as good as they ever were. Sure, fine. But I want to be the best, so I'd better go into debt and buy the latest gear. I'll leave those good as they ever were tools for everyone else to use. Well, I underexposed this one horribly. This is the JPEG. So I opened the RAW in DPP. That's Canon's photo editing app. I increased the exposure 1 2/3 stop. And the 5D Mark II RAW file held up extremely well. And now we're just back to regular JPEG straight out of camera. You've got 9 autofocus points, which if you're a Beatles fan is the correct amount. John would approve. Maybe I'm a little spoiled. I find 9 to be a little limiting Autofocus is not a strength of this camera, in my opinion. Like, the eye is not quite sharp here. Granted, maybe she moved, maybe I moved too much, but I feel like on a 1D series camera it would have been very sharp. This one's very sharp though, so clearly it can get the job done. Just maybe in a somewhat less reliable manner. But you know, if you need to spend a fortune on the latest tech in order to be the best, you're not really the best then, are you? But it's a fine goal. Definitely strive to be the best. Just get there honestly. Don't look for a tool to give you the edge. Just work at it and get good, irrespective of the tools you're using. And don't be so quick to discount the low-light performance on an old DSLR like this. I think the 5D Mark II absolutely shines in low light. This is ISO 4000. Here it is with a modest amount of noise reduction. And here it is with the denoiser in Lightroom. At the time of its release, I saw this as one of the strengths of the camera. And I still do. This is ISO 6400. I think the 5D Mark II handles it great. It's not even really any noisier than 4000, just maybe a little bit more banding. So this is with some modest noise reduction. And then here's the denoiser in Lightroom at 33%, plus a little sharpening. But here's where I get myself into trouble. When digital was first ascending, becoming serious competition for film, I was really interested in the technology, but also I had done my fair share of scanning and working with digitized film photos, and I was aware that 1 megapixel, 2, 4 wasn't a whole lot of resolution, even by the standards of the day. Turned out it was good enough though, because those images held up a lot better over time than I would have expected. Still though, not remotely impressive to a person who can simply count higher. Now 10 plus megapixels, that was starting to sound impressive to my ears. And 20, like the 21 of the 5D Mark II, was holy shit for a while. Because as long as you're assigning numbers to represent something, quality in this case, so I thought, you get used to the number, it doesn't sound so impressive anymore. You can always think of a bigger number. So this is the Jpeg straight out of camera, as they pretty much all have been so far. This is the RAW file exported from DPP with no changes, and this is the RAW file exported from Lightroom with no changes. DPP perfectly replicates the 5D Mark II colors. Lightroom is quite a bit different. And I prefer, at least in this case, much prefer the original native 5D Mark II colors. So this is the JPEG, and this is the RAW rendered in DPP. This is Lightroom. Which I don't hate as much this time. I still prefer the native look, but the Lightroom one's not too bad. It's interesting though. I seldom do these sorts of side-by-side comparisons. That's the JPEG straight out of camera. It's a little underexposed. This is DPP, RAW with no changes. And Lightroom, no changes. Still a little underexposed. Funny enough, I think I actually prefer the Lightroom version in this case. Interesting. So I used to wonder how long until we reach 50 megapixels, 100, 500, 1,000, 10,000. I had watched computer processors following a trajectory like this. Hard drives were becoming unthinkably huge. RAM on graphics cards would like double overnight. And then again the next night. I expected something similar to happen with megapixels, but that really turned out to be the wrong expectation. Cameras are not analogous to hard drives, graphics cards, things that become obsolete. Processors have to process more and more data because the demands of a particular time increase. So we're asking them to do more and more and more, even if we're not aware of it. But nothing analogous is happening with photography. Yet I remained burdened with the desire to marvel at how far we've come. But you're standing in a physical space capturing photons. The amount of photons, their properties, these values don't change. Dare I say, will never change. Neither is the resolving power of your eyeballs increasing, and thus 21 megapixels that the 5D Mark II is giving you look exactly like 21 megapixels did when it was released in 2008, and 100 years from now it will still look exactly the same. Therefore, unlike most technology, and because of this I think we're conditioned to think it's universal, it's not. With camera technology there is such a thing as good enough. There's an end point. If you say this is the only computer I'll ever need, you'll always be wrong, but cameras, lenses too, lenses maybe even more so, are just a different category of thing. They're technology, but they're not susceptible to obsolescence in the same way. If your camera is delivering great results today, it always will, and unless it just breaks down from old age, it truly is the only camera you'll ever need. I think of such things when I make purchases. I know my phone's going to be replaced, my laptop, but when I buy a camera body, and again, particularly when I buy a lens, I think to myself, there's no reason why I will not own this lens until the day I die. What's ever going to top it? What could possibly make it worth giving up more hard-earned money buying the same thing I already own again? This absolutely stumped me. I really thought there was a shot here, but I just could not find it. None of these are right. I was just shooting aimlessly, and that's not something I typically do. And then this is kind of a baffling thing that is common, that I'm also guilty of. If you ever shoot with shallow depth of field, if you ever intentionally overexpose and blow out a sky because it's a look you find interesting, if you ever intentionally underexpose, go for a silhouette, if you're attracted to shooting through fog, through glass, refractive things, shoot off reflective surfaces, if you find black and white appealing, if you're drawn to a grainy image, soft focus, light bloom, if you ever shoot toward the sun to play with lens flare, then you're not really looking for technical perfection, are you? You're shooting in a more emotional sort of way. So then why bother with new gear? How could it possibly benefit your work? Why get the most expensive stuff only to then intentionally degrade the images? Makes no sense. There are tools out there, wonderful tools, that cost very little and are already more in line with your aesthetic preferences. So why the 5D Mark II specifically? Is it really that good of a camera? Well, yes, I would say so. It's very definitely on the list of cameras that will always be good enough, but I feel like it particularly shines in the value for money category. You can pick up a 5D Mark II for $180 to $250 US. I paid $2,700 for mine. Guess I got ripped off. And then I bought a second one. Well, if any tool ever in the history of my life paid for itself many times over, this is the one. So you've got a 21 megapixel full frame sensor here. Nice. Some other stuff as well. I think 21 megapixel full frame is the headline. You get detailed, high quality images with good dynamic range, plenty of nuance in the shadows and the highlights. It shoots video. Surprisingly good video. I thought I might demonstrate it, but I've never quite figured out how to make a video about making a video and make that interesting. It has this lovely 3-inch LCD. It's bright, it's responsive, sharp. You can shoot with live view, as I'm demonstrating. Pretty awesome for a camera this old. Maximum ISO is 6400, which I demonstrated. Expandable up to 25,600. Making it a very capable low-light camera, more than you probably realize or have been led to believe. And oh boy is it weather-sealed, and tough, and it can take a fall. How do I know that? I'd rather not say. Of the classic DSLRs I own, I don't own a ton of them, I'm not a collector. I use all the ones I own. The 5D Mark II is not my favorite, but it is the best, easily the most capable, delivering the highest quality results. And I don't think of this as a conflict. I had a similar feeling with my film cameras back when I was shooting a lot of film. I stopped about a year ago. My best film camera and my favorite film camera were two very different cameras. Favorite is super subjective, so I hesitate to recommend based on what my favorite is. And this camera is objectively better than all the other classic DSLRs I own. And I do recommend based on what is objectively better. And so this is a camera I tend to recommend a lot because it's sitting at such a crazy good price point for the last several years on the secondhand market. And you're getting so much for your money. So much, honestly. If you want a great camera for as little money as possible, and you don't already have a particular longing for a specific model, this is the one to buy, full stop. That's how I see it. And the fact that I say this, freely admitting that it's not my favorite camera, I feel like should carry some additional weight. Because my opinion on this camera has nothing at all to do with nostalgia. Because I feel no nostalgia for it. It's just damn good, that's all. If you're thinking of getting into photography or transitioning from an older DSLR to mirrorless for stills, I should specify, because video makes a lot more sense to go mirrorless. But my advice is, it's the advice I wish I could go back in time and give myself. Just don't. The stuff you already own, and by you I mean me, is fine. It's perfectly fine. More than fine. Don't go down this road. Or if you must buy something, younger me, look at some other old used camera body that will get you excited about photography again. That's fine. But don't fall into the trap of spending thousands and thousands on new gear. I blew it. Took me a bunch of years to realize what was going on. That I regret going mirrorless. This camera works with an external monitor. How cool is that? So I wish I could undo all of my camera and lens purchases, all my camera lens sales, reset everything back to 2018 or so. I would make very different decisions this time. I've actually started to become embarrassed about having modern gear, as though it's an indication that I couldn't make it on talent alone. But if you haven't made the switch, if you're considering spending a bunch of money, I hope I can save you from yourself. You know, people make bad decisions, and I'm a people. You might be one too.